One of the number one tips for gaining more muscle is to work every muscle from two different angles. Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here. I thought I would chat with you guys and gals a little bit about this today. Now people in some circles are going to say, well, this is just common sense. We all know this. But the reality is, no, not everyone knows this. And again, a lot of people are new to lifting. A lot of people are new to fitness. They're new to gains. Or maybe they bought into certain basic minimalist strength training programs. Or they've just now realized that they do need to be gaining muscle mass to reach their goals. Even if they've been into a little bit of fitness and health previously, they didn't realize the importance. So they're trying to research and learn this. And so the thing to think about is, especially if you look at different studies, look at functions of muscles, most of the muscles in your body have more than one function. Most of them have more than one insertion point. And so if we use some basic anatomy and common sense, before we even get into any sort of research, you should be able to look at them. I mean, and even I'm talking simple muscles, a bicep and a tricep, right? See me doing tricep work right there? The tricep actually has two functions, right? Extension of the shoulder and extension of the elbow. So yeah, the elbow is the obvious one, but that long head of the tricep, the bigger head, that horseshoe up on the top half near the armpit, is actually not fully stretched or worked until you get some extension of the shoulder joint. Okay? Biceps, the same thing. Yes, biceps flex the elbow. That is their primary job. That's where you get most of the work. But they also have some shoulder flexion as well, some forward rotation of the shoulder involved. And if you really want to get the most out of them, it's not a bad idea to do both. Okay, and that's what I'm talking about. When we start looking at these different muscles, and you get into something like the deltoid, you see me doing some shoulder presses. Oh man, 3 different functions, 3 different primary functions, and that's before we get into any other possible secondary, such as any sort of flexion or rotation or anything. But just the raising the front, the side, and to the rear, those are the functions of the 3 different heads, and there's a degree of exclusivity to those, okay? So that's stuff to think about, but same thing here, watch the upright rows. Yeah, it works all the heads, but it's going to be focused a little more on the side head, that lateral head, because again, look at the movement involved. But it's going to work all of them. Then you take something like the trapezius up there, which is being worked. It has 3 different functions. Okay, lats have a couple different functions. Your pecs only have one primary, but they have different angles. Look at the quads. There is hip flexion and knee flexion involved. Hamstrings, the same thing. Knee flexion and hip flexion. That hinging pattern. So when you start looking at that, it becomes obvious that most of these major muscles do have more than one function. Okay? And so when you start looking a little bit into research, what do we find? And again, I understand that exercise science research in hypertrophy is a bit limited. It has problems as a science, and I think anyone who's intellectually honest can agree with that. Okay? But, we'll get in a minute to the real world experience and the anecdote of bodybuilders. It definitely shows this all to be true. So that's a whole different topic. But briefly, again, if you look at some of the data, look at studies that have looked at this. What do they find? Literally an extension versus a press, bench pressing versus, say, a tricep extension. Biased muscle growth in people who did them towards the different heads. In other words, pressing, like doing the bench press, works the lateral head of the tricep more than an extension does, or a press down, or any of that. It grows more. Like studies have looked at it and said, yeah, it grows faster from just a bench press versus if you did just the extension. The long head, that other one, the extensions work more than the bench press does, because they involve that function also usually. Okay? It's like, okay, that's interesting. And then when you look at studies where they were both trained, those people gained more muscle in the tricep than the people who did just one exercise. And we've seen this with numerous exercises, but particularly when there's 2 functions. Hamstrings have been a big one, where, again, there's more than one function. It attaches and works at both the knee and at the hip, right? And with it being a big muscle, there's a lot of muscle involved with that. A lot of muscle mass, a lot of muscle fibers being present between those 2 movements. And there is exclusivity to them. meaning there are muscle fibers in parts of the hamstring that do not work from only one of the two functions. They only work from one end of that spectrum and not the other. As far as those movements, they don't even get involved directly, only maybe through some secondary irradiation effect. But they don't do any direct work. Okay? So when you look at some of those studies, we see that, and we'll actually see proximal and distal, meaning the upper versus the lower. Some of those exercises, when they look at MRIs and other stuff, what do they find? Some of the more knee-involved movements grow the hamstring closer to the knee. They cause more growth down there. Some of the more hip-based hinge movements grow the upper 2/3 a little bit more. There's more bias there. Exactly what you would expect. How about pectorals? Well, definitely the same thing. Flat, incline, decline, different angles, whether it's a press, whether it's a fly, whether it's a barbell, a dumbbell, a machine. What do we find? You can absolutely bias your upper versus the lower parts of your chest with the muscle growth, both the activation when it's looked at as well as muscle growth. Okay? It's been observed in the lab. But then you come to the real world, and bodybuilders figured this out way before the studies. So let's set aside even the science. The real world kind of showed all this stuff already. Bodybuilders figured out a long time ago, my upper chest seems to recruit a little more on an incline. I just started doing a bunch of incline, and my upper chest got a little thicker too. Well, I'll be danged. Right? Didn't they see this stuff? And a lot of it had to do with just feeling the muscles and going, you know what? When I do this type of curl versus this type of curl or this type of extension or this type of press, I feel the pec or the tricep or the bicep work more in certain areas than other. I can feel it, particularly people with a large amount of mind-muscle connection who are more body aware. They're aware of what their muscles are doing because they're connected to them. They can feel them. All those people, again, tended to be bodybuilders. Now, that being said, that's going to be the case of, was it because they were bodybuilders, or was it because the people who tended to be able to feel those things better or to learn to feel those things better just turned out to be better bodybuilders? Okay? See where I'm going with that? Maybe that's why so many of their methods worked, because the people who tended to get good results were good at feeling those things and kind of being able to tell where stuff worked and then tailor their training around it. Because they just had, a high body awareness. I've heard that referred to as kinesthetic IQ. Now, that's something you can learn to do, but it comes naturally to some people more than others, right? So they noticed the same thing with all of this. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys and gals next time.